Lonely Lumberjack discovered a paralyzed Lakota girl and taught her to walk into his world. The first snow always came quiet. No wind, no warning. Just a stillness in the pines that whispered, "It's time." Wade Thatcher felt it in his bones before he saw it. He always did. The air thinned, the light changed, and the animals moved like ghosts, vanishing before morning. He rose early that day, before the sun lit the ridges, and stirred the ashes in the stove with the tenderness of a man who remembered fire as company, not heat. The cabin he lived in stood near the edge of a cut bank, overlooking a river that once ran fast, but now barely murmured beneath ice. He built the place himself 10 years ago, stacked each log, chinked each seam with mud and horsehair alone. Alone was what Wade knew. They said he'd come west to vanish, though no one asked from what. Some guessed war. Others said a woman. Wade never said anything. He spoke with his hands, mostly, and sometimes not even then. His eyes were kind but held the silence of things buried too deep to name. That morning, he set out toward the ravine, mule trailing behind, bundled with traps. Winter was closing in. He moved slow, boots sinking in old pine needles, snow flurries dusting his shoulders like breath. The forest knew him. Birds didn't startle. Branches bent in recognition. It was the only place he felt real, beneath boughs older than his pain. Then he saw it. At first, he thought it was just a scrap of hide or cloth caught in the roots near the dry creek bed. But as he neared, the shape shifted, human broken. Still, a girl lay curled where the ground had fallen away, her legs twisted unnaturally beneath her. Long black hair, matted to her back, blood dried at her temple. Her dress, torn, soiled, was the sort given converted Indian girls by missionary schools. One moccasin missing, the other split at the sole. He froze, breath held. A coyote watched on the ridge above, but didn't move. The girl's chest rose, barely. She was alive. Wade dropped to his knees beside her. Her face was young. 20, maybe. The features unmistakable, Lakota, but softer, thinner than what he remembered from the plains. Her eyelids fluttered at the warmth of his hand. She didn't speak, didn't move. A small medicine pouch rested at her throat, tied with sinew. He didn't touch it. He did what needed doing. With quiet care, he wrapped her in his coat, lifting her like she weighed no more than a memory. The mule shifted behind him, uneasy. Wade walked. It took the better part of an hour to reach the cabin. The girl never made a sound, not a whimper, not a plea. Snow thickened around them, gentle but sure, the kind that erased tracks. He laid her on his bed, stoked the fire, then boiled willow bark for fever. As the wind picked up, the shutters rattled like bones in the walls. He watched her chest, counting the seconds between each breath. He didn't ask her name. She didn't offer one. The night passed with only the howl of wolves in the far woods and the cracking of frozen logs in the fire. Wade sat by her side, sharpening a blade not for use, but for rhythm, steel on stone keeping him from drifting. By morning, she opened her eyes, dark, wary, like a deer that had known the hunt too long. She tried to speak. Her lips parted, but no sound came. He lifted a tin cup of water. She drank a little, then she looked down. Her legs lay still beneath the blanket. She frowned, tried to move her toes. Nothing, just the weight of them, just absence. Wade met her eyes. His voice came soft, dusted with years. They didn't break you, just bent your path. She stared, like the words themselves hurt, then turned her head toward the wall and closed her eyes. He let her be. Over the days that followed, he learned to read her silences. She was alert, watchful. Though she didn't speak, her hands moved slowly, carefully. She took the water he gave, the broth, the medicine. She listened to the forest sounds beyond the cabin. She listened to him, too, when he worked, when he stirred stew, when he mended tools with a patience most men had lost. He began leaving his journal open on the table. Inside were sketches, trees, birds, and one old drawing of a woman's hand. Ayoka. He began to call her in his mind, though he hadn't earned her name yet. It meant she brought happiness. He remembered the word from a Lakota woman long gone. Once she tried to rise. She gritted her teeth, pressed her palms into bedding and strained. Her body quivered with effort. Her arms shook, but her legs would not answer. She crumpled into herself, jaw clenched, chest rising fast. Not crying, no tears, just that hollow kind of rage, the kind that lives in people who've had something stolen from them and blamed for the theft. He stepped forward and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. She didn't flinch. That mattered. He said nothing. Words wouldn't heal what time and bone had undone. But he began building something, just the same. He cleared a space near the fire and set 2 strong poles into ground, parallel, waist-high. He sanded them smooth, planted them firm. No explanation, just left them there. A few nights later, she looked at the bars, then at him. Her voice came for the first time, rough as wind, just one word. Why? He looked over from the chair, the soft flicker of firelight dancing in his eyes. So you don't forget the shape of standing. She turned away, but her hand brushed the blanket back and rested near her hip where muscle had gone soft. Outside, the snow deepened. The wind howled down the mountain in long, low sighs. He listened. He always listened. One evening, days later, a bird struck the window, a small gray jay. Stunned, he picked it up, warmed in his palm, and set it on the sill. Ayoka watched. It'll fly again, he said, when it remembers how. She didn't answer, but the corner of her mouth lifted. Barely. That night, she dreamed. Wade could tell by her breathing. And in the morning, her fingers wrapped faintly around the edge of the blanket, inching toward the floor. The forest around them slept under snow, but inside the cabin, something was stirring. No one else would have noticed, but Wade did, because he knew the sound of a soul turning. They never spoke of the day he found her. It lived between them like a shadow that had chosen not to leave. But in the silence, something steady grew. The mountain had taken in 2 broken things that winter, one who could not walk, and one who had forgotten why he ever did. And though the fire was low and the world beyond the window stayed cold and wide, the cabin held a hush not of endings, but beginnings, like the stillness before thaw, like the ache before a step, like 2 stories, stitched by survival, beginning to remember how to be one the days folded on themselves like worn pages in a book too long left in the sun. Snow softened the world to a hush, muffling all sounds except the slow creak of old timber, the whisper of wind in the eaves, the quiet cadence of 2 people learning how to exist in each other's space without words. She woke earlier now, not for long, just enough to study him, the way his shoulders sloped when he stirred the pot, the stillness in him that never quite broke. Wade moved like a man who didn't need to prove he was real, only present. Each gesture deliberate, each silence honest. She never asked how long she'd slept, or where he came from. She only asked once for a comb. He found one in a drawer he hadn't opened in years. It was cracked with time. When he handed it to her, her fingers lingered not on his but on the comb itself, as if it remembered someone else's hand. She began brushing her hair in slow, gentle strokes. Her arms trembled by the 3rd pull, but she kept going. He watched from the corner, careful not to intrude on something so private. It was the first thing she did for herself. Each morning, she reached a little farther, once to fetch a tin cup, once to straighten the quilt. Her legs remained lifeless beneath her, useless as bark stripped from a dead tree, but her spirit was something else entirely. Sharp, alert, waiting. On the 5th morning, she tried to pull herself from the bed. She didn't call for him, just gritted her teeth and pushed. Her palms scraped against the floorboards, arms shaking with the strain. She collapsed before reaching the edge. Wade crossed the room in 2 strides and lifted her gently, setting her back on the mattress like one might return a fallen book to its shelf. She didn't look at him, but she didn't cry either. Later, when he laid rabbit stew before her, she asked her first full question. Why? He turned toward her. The fire crackled behind him, painting his face in the color of dying coals. He didn't need her to explain. You didn't crawl here by choice, he said softly. But if you want to stand, I'll help. She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. He began building again. 2 days passed before the rails were done. 2 slender bars carved smooth from strip cedar, set into the floor like ribs in the spine of the room. They stood a few feet apart, anchored deep. Between them, space for steps not yet taken. She stared at them like they were something holy. He gave her space. Let her decide when. That evening, while the sky bruised purple beyond the pines, she asked, barely above breath, "What is this place?" "My home," he answered. "No," she said, eyes narrowing. This land." He looked out the window, where the peaks turned lavender against the snow. "Black hills, sacred to your people, stolen by mine." She didn't speak after that, but the next morning, she pulled herself upright and gripped the bars. She didn't try to walk, not yet, but she stood there, spine rigid, sweat on her brow, and let her legs remember their shape. That was enough. He sat nearby, pretending to carve a handle, but he was watching, always watching, never hovering, never instructing, just there, a steady presence, a tree at her back. When she collapsed, he was there before the breath left her chest. "You okay?" he murmured. She closed her eyes. "I was a runner once, the best in my band." He waited. "My uncle said I ran like the wind remembered me." Her voice was flat. "Then I met a man who wanted to marry me. Said he loved my laugh, loved my legs. I fell from a wagon one winter, broke my back. He left me behind in a ravine. Said he couldn't carry dead weight." Wade didn't speak, just placed a blanket over her shoulders. "Thought I'd die out there. Would've if you hadn't come." His voice came quiet. "You were still breathing. I just followed the sound." That night, she asked for charcoal and hide. He gave her both. She began drawing shapes, feathers, wind trails, symbols from her childhood. He didn't know their names, but he knew their meaning. Memory. Each day after, she stood longer. Arms trembling, knees slack, but she stood. Her eyes lit with fire, not shame. She fell sometimes, bruised, wept once when she tried to step, and her foot refused. But she tried again the next morning. He began carving walking canes. None quite right. She wanted her hands free, wanted balance to come from within. A trapper came through one day. Josiah, old meatus man with a face like river stone. He tipped his hat when he saw her sitting upright. "Girls got fight in her," he said, sipping the coffee Wade poured. "Notice you smiling more these days, Lumberjack." Wade said nothing, but the flicker in his eyes betrayed him. After Josiah left, she asked, "You trust him?" "He's earned it," Wade replied. She looked out the window. "I've never known a white man who didn't want something." Wade didn't argue. He understood the weight of that sentence. "You can ask me," he said. What I want." She studied him. "Do you? I want you to walk again. Not for me. For you." Silence. "Then, and if I don't?" He met her gaze. "Then I'll carry you until you say stop." That night, she took her first step. Just one. She screamed when her heel touched the ground. Fell hard. He caught her. Her nails dug into his shirt, and her body shook with rage, not pain. But when she looked up, he was still holding her, not trying to fix her, just staying. The next day, she tried again. And the day after, the cold thickened. Snow swallowed the roof. The outside world faded into myth. But inside, warmth grew. Not the kind from fire. The kind that sat between them as she traced the beadwork pattern and he split logs. The kind that lingered when their hands brushed over a shared cup. The kind that didn't need names. One evening, as they sat in candlelight, her voice drifted into the stillness. "My name is Ayoka." He set down his knife. "Means," she brought happiness. "My mother gave it to me when I was born in the green season." He nodded. "It suits you." She smiled then. Not big, just enough to say I see you too. Outside the snow slowed. Trees creaked like old bones stretching. The forest leaned in listening. And deep in the night, when all was quiet, she stood again. No scream this time. Only breath. Only balance. Only the slow, miraculous stillness of a girl who couldn't run, remembering that she could stand. There were no miracles in that cabin, only mornings. And each one brought the same question. Could she do today what yesterday denied her? Ayoka rose with the light now. Not fully, not always steady, but she greeted the dawn like someone determined to meet herself. Wade had reinforced the rails, bracing them tighter into the wood. Each time her palms met the bars, she breathed deep, closed her eyes, and whispered something under her breath, a prayer or a promise. He never asked which. He stopped counting her steps after the first 5. They were messy things, trembling and crooked. Her left foot dragged sometimes, toes catching the floor. But they were hers, earned by grit, paid for in silence and bruised knees. In the quiet moments, he could see it, the fire in her spine, not anger, not grief, just a sheer, stubborn will to live on her own terms. He noticed how she no longer flinched when he entered the room, how she began leaving small things behind, hair comb, beadwork, a feather tied in twine, as if claiming the cabin not just as a shelter, but as her space too. Not a guest, not a patient, a presence. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, but sometimes while she rested, he'd read aloud from a worn book of folk tales. His voice was low, slow, like a stream moving through stone. One afternoon, she interrupted. "Did she come here?" she asked, nodding to the book. "The woman from before." He paused, closed the book gently. "She died a long time ago." Ayoka nodded. No more questions. But that night, she left half her stew untouched. Later, when the fire was almost ash, she said, "I was to be married." Wade didn't turn, just listened. He was white, a farmer, promised a house, said he liked how I smiled. She folded her hands in her lap. "When I fell, he told me I was cursed, said I was weak, that a man needs a strong woman to build with, not one who breaks before the ground does." Her voice did not shake. That made it worse somehow. "He left me in the snow," Wade said. "If the Great Spirit wanted me alive, he'd send someone." He looked at her then. His eyes weren't wide with shock, just quiet. "You shouldn't have had to wait." She exhaled long and soft and nodded once. It was the first time she said his name. In the days that followed, something softened between them. Not romance, not yet. Something older, deeper. Recognition. They did not belong to each other. Not in the way townspeople do, not in rings or words or rules. But they moved like two trees growing toward the same light. And that was enough. She began to walk short distances now, gripping the rails at first, then one cane, then none. Each step a kind of song, off-key, halting, beautiful. She helped more with chores. Cut root vegetables with steady hands. Sewed new lining into his coat. Repaired a tear in his flannel without being asked. The rhythm of shared survival. One evening, she found him on the porch, watching the sky bleed orange over the ridge. "Teach me," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "To dance." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I don't dance." "You do now." So he stood, awkward and uncertain, while she placed her hand in his. Her fingers were callous now, toughened by railings and spoons and stone. She moved slow, swaying more than stepping. There was no music, only the wind through the trees and the rasp of their breath. But it was enough when he placed his hand on her waist. He did it like a man lifting a page from a sacred book, and when her head tipped slightly toward his shoulder, it was not out of weakness. It was choice. After that night, the world felt different, brighter, even when gray. The snow melted in slow drips from the roof. The creek spoke again beneath the thaw. Spring whispered around the edges. He gave her space to walk on her own now, trusted her to know her limits. One afternoon, she made it to the hill behind the cabin. A small walk, but for her, a summit. She stood there, arms outstretched, hair wild in the breeze. And he saw it, what she must have looked like before the fall, before pain pressed her down. She wasn't healed, not completely, but she was rising. That evening, over a dinner of beans and venison, he said, "You ever think about staying?" She chewed slowly, looked at him. "I already have." He swallowed hard, said nothing, but the way he exhaled told her everything. Later, when the stars came out in their silent hundreds, she pulled a blanket over his shoulders and sat beside him on the step. Their arms brushed. "You're not afraid of me," she said. "No, even though I'm scarred." He turned to her. "I see them, but I don't think they scare me." She tilted her head. "What do they make you feel?" He thought a long moment. "Like I wasn't the only one who lost something." She nodded. That made sense to her. Neither of them reached for the other that night, but both stayed out longer than they needed to, watching the moon rise like a slow-held breath. In the early morning, she stepped into the cabin unaided for the first time. No cane, no rails, just her. Wade didn't say a word. He only rose from the table and nodded once, the faintest smile on his lips. Outside, the last snow clung to the edge of the porch, melting drop by drop into the thawed earth. Each footstep she took that morning was a kind of resurrection, a slow, graceful defiance of all who called her broken. She didn't walk fast, or proud, or perfect. She walked like a woman who crawled through pain and found herself standing in someone else's warmth, and realized it might be hers, too. Not claimed, not owned, shared. And deep in the forest, as crows passed overhead and deer shifted to the bramble, there was a silence, not of grief, but of becoming. The kind that comes before love. The kind that stays. Spring rose slow over the hills, as if the land itself feared it might be too soon to bloom again. Buds crept timid from the branches, and the river, once muted by ice, began to murmur its way back into the world. Ayoka's footsteps were stronger now, still careful but no longer cautious. She moved to the cabin like it had always been hers, tending the fire, sewing soft pelts into curtains, bringing scent and shape into what had once been a hollow for morning. Her body bore the map of what she had endured, but she wore her scars with the quiet grace of someone who had chosen not to be defined by them. She no longer spoke of the man who left her to die. There was nothing left in his shadow worth remembering, until the knock came. Wade had been splitting kindling near the woodpile when the sound echoed off the cabin wall. Not a stranger's hesitation. A man's claim. When he opened the door, he found 3 riders, 2 younger men with dust on their boots and liquor on their breath, and in front of them, a man whose eyes Wade recognized before the voice even came. James Carver dismounted with the cocky sway of someone who'd never been told no. His coat was new, his mouth smug, but his eyes, those hadn't changed. Cold, entitled, empty. "Well, I'll be damned," Carver said, looking past Wade toward the cabin's dark interior. "She's still alive." Wade stepped forward. "You're not welcome here." "I got papers," Carver replied, reaching into his coat. "She's mine." Promised an agreement. Took her in, fed her, dressed her. Can't help if she got herself broke. Wade didn't move. "She's not yours. She's not anyone's." Carver's smile curved cruel. "You can keep your woodpile and your silence, old man, but that girl's coming back with me, or I'll bring someone who'll make you give her up." The threat lingered like smoke. Ayoka appeared in the doorway behind Wade, her shoulders square, her breath steady. "I walk now," she said, each word calm and clear. "I don't belong to you." Carver blinked, took a step closer. "You remember what I said?" he sneered. "You're broken goods. You think he's going to want you when he finds out what you can't give him?" She tilted her head, unflinching. "He already knows." Wade stood beside her, silent as a tree rooted deep in the earth. He didn't raise his fists, didn't fetch his rifle. He only spoke. "You had your chance to stand beside someone brave. You threw it away." Carver's hand hovered near his belt, where a pistol sat half-holstered. One of his men twitched, unsure. Then from the woods came a voice. "Unless you plan to shoot a woman standing on her own feet, I'd be on my way." Josiah stepped from the trees, musket slung across his shoulder, eyes sharp. Behind him came 3 more trappers, men who lived by instinct and honor, not ink and law. Carver's bravado wilted under their gaze. The law had no place this deep in the hills. Out here, respect held more power than parchment. He spat once into the dirt. "She'll come crawling back, like they all do." "No," Ayoka said. "I've already crawled." Carver mounted his horse with a curse. The others followed. No shots fired. No names shouted. Just hooves disappearing down the trail, and the long, slow exhale of danger passing. Wade didn't speak as he closed the door. He didn't need to. Ayoka stood in the center of the room, her body trembling, but not from fear. "You didn't stop him," she said, voice low. "I didn't need to." She stepped toward him. "You let me stand." His eyes were full of something soft and unspoken. "You didn't need saving, just room to rise." That night, she slept beside him, not as a guest, not as someone sheltered, but as a woman who had walked back into her life on her own legs. They didn't touch, not at first, but her hand found his in the dark, and he held it, like one would hold fire, not to possess, but to feel warm again. In the days that followed, the cabin changed. She began planting a garden, roots in real earth, seeds pressed between fingertips that had once dug through frozen dirt to survive. Wade built a swing from old rope and cedar planks. She read aloud to him in Lakota while he carved, her voice strong, full of rhythm and wind. No one came looking again. One evening, she walked alone to the aspen tree where Wade had buried the past. A simple cross marked the place, aged and soft with time. She knelt, not to mourn, but to speak. She would have liked the quiet, she whispered. And I think she would have liked me, too. Wade came behind her, placing a feather in her palm. "She brought happiness," he said. Ayoka looked up, smiled gently. "So they say." They didn't speak of marriage. No vows, no town papers. But their lives braided together like the fibers of the swing that rocked slowly in the wind. She taught him her language. He taught her how to fish without scaring the stream. When they argued, they did so with respect. When they laughed, it sounded like water finding its way through stone. One morning, as the sun broke over the hill in a gold too bright to look at, she stepped onto the porch alone, a warm cup in hand. Wade came beside her, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "You still think about that day?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. "I don't," she replied, not unkindly. "Because this is a day that stayed." He kissed her then, slow and steady, like closing the final page of a story written not in ink, but in steps. Behind them, the cabin stood strong. Before them, the land stretched wide, waiting. And somewhere, far off, the world turned, forgetting her name. But she had remembered it, and he had, too. So if you find yourself lost in a world that leaves you behind, remember this. The strongest people are not the ones who never fell. They're the ones who stood again, even if someone had to teach them how, even if the walk home took a little longer. If you enjoyed this Wild West tale, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and tap the bell icon so you never miss another story by the fire. Bell Couch Hatface. Ask ChatGPT.